So it's over. The journey is now complete. Now, I made 2 videos about the Amazing Digital Circus before, and I had actually intended originally to make videos for every new episode that would release. But that didn't end up happening, obviously. But we're here for the finale. I had to pay $22 to see this thing in theaters because I figured there was zero way I was going to be able to avoid spoilers for 2 weeks. The first thing I was greeted with was the Zach Hadelfish telling me to stay after the credits for a QR code that would have exclusive new merch. Because I guess that's what it was all about in the end.
Merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made.
Say what you want about Star Wars and Marvel movies just being 2-hour toy commercials. At least they aren't providing you links to their products in the goddamn theater. Anyways, after rewatching the 8th episode, we get on to the hour-long finale. And yes, I am spoiling this whole thing. Now, I want to say that I did like the overall direction they went with the ending. The execution itself, however, was something I found ultimately disappointing. I really think they were not ready to end this series yet. They needed a few more episodes, maybe even an entire second season. I think Kane's deletion in episode 8 should have segued us into the final season, centering on the avatars trying to survive without Kane and also not losing their minds. I just think the ending was way too rushed and didn't make a whole lot of sense for it to end up tied up as neatly as it was. It just wasn't earned. If I actually did go forward with talking about every episode of this show, there are lots of praises and criticisms I would have brought up, so I'll briefly talk about them. For one thing, the animation improves a lot from episode to episode. The character designs are very expressive, which helps a lot for the more intense scenes. The show is also very funny. Episode 5 in particular being the one that made me laugh the hardest. That being said, there are some problems. For one, this show admittedly does not have the greatest dialogue at times. A lot of people have criticized the show for being too much like a therapy session for the characters, and I can understand that. I do think anyone who agrees with that criticism will not like this finale because it's basically nothing but that. However, what I will say is, I figured this would be a character-first show and not necessarily plot or lore-based. I don't necessarily think this show accomplishes its full potential, nor do I think it ends up being what I assume it wanted to be. I think the finale is a culmination of the problems I've had with the show, so let's get into that. So the first thing we learn in the finale is that the characters are all brain scans. In layman's terms, only copies of their brains were uploaded to the digital circus. They aren't actually physically trapped in the circus because they are merely copies of their real-life counterparts who are still going about their daily lives. Now, how they actually ended up getting into the circus is not really clarified. Do they even remember it in real life? Who knows? This is a pretty big fucking reveal, and yet it oddly isn't dwelled upon that much. We see characters cry a bit, but overall this finale mainly focuses on Jax, and then soon Kane. Everyone weirdly forgives Kinger over how much worse he made the situation a little too quickly as well. Actually, the easily forgiving nature of the characters is one of the major problems of this finale, and I will get into this. Now, after some of this crying and shit happens, what we were all inevitably expecting to happen happens. Jax abstracts. Off screen. Yeah, off screen. They just show an abstraction and are like, oh well, there goes Jax. Like, what the fuck? For a brief moment, I thought this was Kaufmo or something that was able to like free himself because of the absence of Kane, but no, it's just the death of a major character who just dies, and that's it. Like, has this ever worked? Has a major character dying off screen ever worked? I'm interested to know what you guys think because I can't think of too many examples. Maybe Llewellyn Moss? I don't know. It happens, I guess. It's just not preferable. Now eventually Pomni confronts Jax and kind of goes into his mind or something. This is when we get to one of the film's biggest problems. It focuses too much on Jax, but like, he's dead. And I assumed maybe there was some way to unabstract him. It kind of gives you the impression that Pomni's going to try to find a way to save him or something. At least that's what I thought, but this doesn't happen. The series ends with Jax remaining abstracted. So it just kind of makes it hard to care. It doesn't even really make sense for Pomni specifically to learn about his backstory, as it really changes very little. Kinda should have just been conveyed to the audience. They have a short conversation, but nothing changes. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think Jax's backstory is sad enough. I just don't care that much. I don't feel that much sympathy for him because of how much of a dick he was. His backstory is essentially that his parents got divorced, his mom took her anger out on him, and this led to a fight where Jax shoves his mom and thinks that he may have killed or seriously injured her. When he gets to the circus, he grows a close bond with Kaufmo and Ribbit, and he tells Ribbit the backstory. He regrets doing this and ends up pushing away Ribbit, ruining their friendship and causing her to abstract, and maybe possibly influencing Kaufmo's abstraction as well. That one's a bit more vague. Yeah, it's not great what he went through, but even in his traumatic backstory, he's still a huge asshole. I don't know, man. I just didn't give a shit. I think a great comparison to this would be none other than Asuka from Neon Genesis Evangelion. Much like Jax, she has bad behavior and trouble connecting with others due to her past traumas. Now I know comparing a YouTube series to NGE is like comparing a college art major's final to the fucking Mona Lisa, but Asuka is obviously a way better written character. Her backstory was genuinely horrific and really changes the way you see her. Upon subsequent viewings of the show, I really ended up understanding her a lot better. Now she gets bonus points in sympathy because 1, she's a kid while Jax is an adult, and 2, she's not as awful as Jax is to other people. She's obviously not nice to Shinji, but most people see her as annoying or arrogant more than anything. She certainly isn't as cruel as Jax can be. Jax is just a horrible guy, so you really need to make his backstory sad. Gago is literally fucking terrified of him. And there's a scene where he looks Pomni right in the eye and says possibly one of the cruelest and most hurtful things you can say to a person, particularly a person who cares about you. But oh, his mommy was mean to him, so I guess I'm supposed to feel bad for him. No, fuck you, Jax. If anything, I hate him even more now. The way he treated Ribbit was completely uncalled for, and he didn't have much of a reason to do so. If he had a really close relationship with his father before he left, I could maybe understand, but he said he wasn't that close with his father, so I don't really know how this trauma leads to him sabotaging his friendship with Ribbit. With Asuka, it made a lot of sense, but with Jax, it just makes him look like more of an asshole. So yeah, I really don't care that much that Jax abstracted. I mean, as far as I see it, they're kind of just better off without him. Now, obviously, I'm not literally trying to downplay the effects that verbal abuse can have on you, but since most of this abuse happens off screen, we don't know the extent of what really happened, what was said and done. For all we know, Jax is an unreliable narrator. You know, what his mom said to him, what he said to his mom, we just don't know specifically, so it's kind of just up to our interpretation on how bad it was according to Jax. Now, I know the response a lot of fans have given to this criticism is, not all characters are meant to be sympathetic. Now, that would be true, but the movie very clearly was trying to make us feel for Jax here. Not necessarily as a redemption arc, but as an explanation for why he was the way he was. But at that point, it's just ineffective. Plus, I don't think the cause and effect for his actions is defined well enough. Like, what's the specific thought process for viciously bullying and targeting Gangle? The only real explanation for most of the show is that he's just a sadistic guy who likes hurting others. Going back to Asuka, I feel like most of her actions had an easier thought process behind why she did what she did. Not necessarily saying that it was right or excusable, just a little more understandable. Hell, even other characters like Bojack and Walter White are arguably way worse people than Jax, yet still, in my opinion, ends up being more sympathetic and likable than Jax is. It just comes down to their writing. I don't even find Jax a fun character to hate. He's just unlikable. Bojack's decisions at least have some level of comprehensive logic to them that I as a viewer can at least understand. I have zero idea why Jax decided to start viciously torturing Gangle every day. The only conclusion I can get is that he's just a cruel bully. So when the series tells us about his mean parents, it just doesn't add enough context to this to make a difference for me. Now obviously this is just my personal opinion. If you found the backstory sufficient enough for you to shed a tear for poor Jax, then by all means, good for you. And this is what I was referring to a little earlier. It makes you wonder what kind of message they're trying to convey here. Obviously, not every character needs to be redeemed, but it feels like no real satisfying or meaningful conclusion to his arc happens here. He just admits he's a terrible person, and yeah, he is. After you've done irreparable damage, you decide that, but now he's dead, so what does it matter? Even if he did want to change or be saved, he's physically incapable of doing so now. If Jax's whole character was that he's just kind of a jerk sometimes, I could forgive him a little, but he's just too cruel, too much of a bully, and too unequivocally nasty for me to care. And I'm given no reason to anyway, because he's fucking dead. They may have well elaborated a bit in these flashbacks. Kaufmo and Ribbit have very little actual character and only exist as plot devices to show what pushed Jax to abstract. It would have been a bit more of a gut punch if they actually developed this more outside of a few short clips. Now obviously around 2 years ago I made that whole "Is Jax sociopath" video. In the end, I have to say, I don't think Jax is a sociopath anymore, he's just a dickhead. It's actually hilarious how many Jax fans were holding out for some sort of redemption. Sucks to be you, I guess. So despite wasting so much time with this finale on this purple fucker, we get surprisingly very little actual development from everyone else. You know, for a character-based show that has all of like 6 characters, they surprisingly don't interact with each other that much. Sure, we've had some meaningful relations with Pomni and Kinger, Pomni and Jax, Pomni and Ragatha, Zubul and Gangle, but what about everyone else? Do Jax and Kinger ever have an interesting conversation? What about Ragatha and Zubul? They're quite the opposite from each other personality-wise. Would be interesting to see. What about Zubul and Pomni? This is part of why I feel like this show should just kept going on a little longer. Just makes you wonder why they need to end the series so quickly. I mean, it's only 9 episodes. Like, you're not going to be The Simpsons or SpongeBob just because you went a little bit longer. I think there's a bit more potential in there. So then Kane shows up and oversees the other characters and wait, what the fuck? Kane? Kane? How the fuck are you here right now? So yeah, Kane is just not dead, I guess. Makes you wonder what the point of killing him off even was, because it arguably didn't make that much of a difference. Sure, it caused Jax to finally abstract, but was that even necessary for that to happen? So Kane sees everyone else better off without him, and he has this whole come to Jesus moment where he realizes how bad he's been and decides to change. This takes of all like 10 minutes. Yeah, he's just nice now. They even have him tear out this blue orb in his head, which I guess controls his evil side. That's a nice cop-out. He's only bad because of this blue shit in him. Now he's nice. Kane then returns to the circus and everyone's just mildly surprised he's back. I think they should probably be screaming and cowering in fear right now that the evil god they think they vanquished has returned, but no. Kane then says he's sorry and will give them control over the circus, and they just all accept his apology. They do mention it will take some time to build trust with him, but after the shit he pulled with those 2 buttons, I feel like realistically they should never believe a word that comes out of his mouth ever again. Especially considering the fact that they are all aware he is just an AI and not an actual person. But for some reason, the guy that was literally fucking torturing them and going insane in the last episode is now nice again, and it's not worth discussing or questioning in the slightest. I don't understand this. I would have had them maybe have some type of group conversation going over the pros and cons of trusting Kane, maybe create some drama or a vote. Maybe even rifts to be formed between the friends over this. But no, it's the last episode and we just gotta wrap all this bullshit up, I guess. Kane also rewards the characters by telling them their true names and showing them how their lives are going in the real world. Conveniently, all of them are having nice, happy lives, even Jax. And the thing is, absolutely nothing about the circus had any effect on this. Regardless of how things went down here, they all would have had happy lives in the real world regardless. Everyone's also just really accepting of this, which I find strange. You're literally not a real person, and you're just seeing your real self making friends and living a great life, having a good job, and you're just okay with all this? You don't go over some type of existentialism over this, or feel somewhat robbed of your good life? I wouldn't care too much about this, but the show puts great lengths in describing the trauma of being in the circus. In this episode alone, Kinger praises Pomni on how quickly she was able to adjust to living here. I feel like seeing something like this would be hard to get over, and especially hard to forgive Kane for. He literally robbed their consciousness of a happy life in the real world. He also faces no consequences for this. Now, as I said, I actually like the idea of everyone becoming content with their lives in the circus and not actually escaping. Now, granted, how long they can actually go on with that is, I guess, something to theorize on, but whatever. However, the way we got to this ending just feels insanely rushed and blatantly twists the narrative to get here. In conclusion, as much as I hate to say it as someone who's been following this series since the beginning, The Amazing Digital Circus is just okay in the end. It's not really a truly great series, only a decent one, which is a shame because it had a lot of potential and some great ideas, but it simply wasn't able to effectively convey them in their execution. Had this series been given more time to develop the characters and the story, and more work had been done on the script, we could have gotten something truly great. This finale wasn't terrible or anything. I don't think it's going to jettison the show's reputation as something like Game of Thrones did, but I do think it will remain divisive and will prevent the show from being known beyond just kind of a mid-web series that made a lot of major strides for indie animation. What it represents, I think, will outshine its actual quality, but whatever, it's over now, so I guess that's where we leave off. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to buy the new Digital Circus Fortnite skins so you can win the big victory royale.